Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
I am so pleased to welcome back our executive editor, the man behind Heartland Signal, Tim Hogan, is here. Tim, are you just having the best week ever?
Hey, Joan. Yeah, it's good. I don't know. I last week we were told this is a new disciplined Trump administration. They're coming in with a lot of ideas they're going to execute. And by week 2, we were asking ourselves if anybody knows if Medicaid still exists. So here we are.
Yes, indeed. And I'm sorry we have to live through this, but I've speculated all along that his lack of discipline, his tendency to overreach, and his profound lack of understanding of how government actually works, I think that, I've been complaining about how we haven't heard as much from Democrats on Capitol Hill as I would like. Luckily, Donald Trump seems to have guns pointed at his feet that he shoots on a regular basis. But I don't know how much longer we can count on that, because people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and Jeff Bezos have, I think, learned that you write a big enough check and Trump will literally do whatever you want him to do. So I don't know how we fight that, Tim.
Well, I think right now there was a big question as to how exactly do we do that? How do the Democrats find their footing? We were caught off guard in the election. We always knew it was a possibility that Donald Trump was going to win, but we didn't really have a plan, and I think the energy was not there for the resistance that there was in 2017, because in 2017 we were able to say this is not normal, and there was a lot of mobilization. And the sad reality is this second election, this is normal. This is the current normal. So I think people were caught a little flat-footed by that. But to your point, look, the fuel that we need to fight back, we obviously need to do some soul searching and reflection and think about how we appeal to working class voters. But we also are seeing day in, day out the things that remind people why they do not like Donald Trump. He is handing the reins of the government over to Elon Musk. There is a ton of reporting. There's an exclusive from Reuters this afternoon about him installing his employees at OPM and locking people out of their accounts. That is basically the HR system for the federal civil service. And we saw Trump come out, this week when we want some comfort from our commander-in-chief after there's a tragedy, and with no evidence, blames a tragic incident on DEI and goes after Pete Buttigieg. This is the stuff that people said even when they held their nose, maybe the policy will be okay, but I really hate when he does this. This is the stuff that people hate. And I think there is a reminder there for Democrats that you need to fight back. You need to find your footing and not confirm any of these nominees. There should be no Democrat voting for any confirmation of any nominee while what's happening at OPM is happening, which is a takeover of the federal government, a gutting of the federal civil service.
I think that what you just said is really interesting, because I don't know if you, I think it was in Illinois Playbook, somewhere they reported this call that took place between the Democratic governors and Chuck Schumer, and the minutia of what was discussed was in that call, and the governors made that same argument, that why are Democrats voting for these cabinet positions? Even if we don't have the votes to derail a nomination, it can be shown to be a solid protest if every Democrat votes no. And according to the reporting, they had 5 different sources of people who were either on the call or told about the call directly. Schumer's response was, for some of them we can probably do that, but, not for all of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, here's the thing I'll say about that is if you look at where there has been some really effective leadership in short order, in particular on the federal funding freeze and what it meant for states. And we watch this at Heartland Signal because we're focused on people in the Midwest, leadership in the Midwest. Both Governor Walz out of Minnesota and Governor Pritzker in Illinois were some of the first people to say, we got to flood the zone. I'm going to get out there. I'm going to hold a press conference. I'm going to tell you about the Head Start programs that are being frozen, kids being turned away. I'm going to tell you about the research grants that are being frozen that are preventing our universities and institutions from doing what they need to do. And I'm going to tell you that healthcare is now in peril for a bunch of Americans because we can't even access the portal to get those grants. And, you know, there was a little bit of backing down from the Trump administration, depending on how you read the OMB memo and its rescission. But that is what Democrats need to do right now. In addition, I think, to not cooperating with confirmation is to flood the zone. And I don't mean to sit back and think about what's the best slogan and what's a billboard I can put up at my press conference that's a good graphic. Like, we just have to be out there. Donald Trump has been out there doing press conferences, gaggles, executive orders every single day. And there is a battle for attention that he has always been good at, good or bad attention. And we are constantly caught behind in that game. And some of it is a big problem. It's not like marching everyone out to do a press conference, 3 times in 36 hours or whatever is the answer. It is also about finding the right messengers and people who can speak in a way that people understand, that it's not some like consultant speak that can outline the stakes. And unfortunately, that's not everybody in Washington. Some people are good at different things.
Well,
I will say someone
that, I've been playing a lot of sound clips from Chris Murphy, who seems to have emerged as the conscience and the passion of the U.S. Senate. And I agree, not everybody can speak like a Bernie Sanders from the heart or a Chris Murphy. But dear God, that's 2. There's got to be more than 2, Tim.
I would throw Michael Bennett in there. I think Michael Bennett did an incredible job. And it's different types of communication, right? It is, okay, you're at the confirmation hearing. Are you doing an actual tough cross-examination of these nominees? I think Michael Bennett did a great job in 2 hearings, I think this week and last week. And we just need more of that. I think Senator Amy Klobuchar, I'm a little biased, I used to work for her, also did a really good job with Kash Patel yesterday, who was incredibly rude and dismissive. So yeah, it's painful, but it is like a party growing moment because we kind of have to think like, who are the good messengers to be out there? Whether or not you agree entirely on every bit of policy together as a caucus, like, it's not about focusing on anything that's divisive right now. It's about stopping what we can all agree is bad from happening.
Yeah, without question. Did you hear the part of the governor and Chuck Schumer, Democratic governors and Chuck Schumer phone call where he told them that Cory Booker was in charge of the Senate's digital strategy, and that Cory Booker had put together a PowerPoint for the senators explaining what TikTok is and how often you should post, and Facebook and Instagram. And on the one hand, I suppose better late than never, but on the other hand, I found that utterly appalling. And it seems to speak to the whole senators are old and out of touch kind of argument that I hear fairly often on this show. I mean, what do you think about that? What's your reaction?
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm glad that presentation was made, but also, and there are, talented staff who know how to do that and should be doing it. But yes, the question I think is, in many circumstances, would you rather have someone, and again, but the point being that different people have different strengths. Every strength is not necessarily about communication, but I would say that is a very big part of what they do. Would you rather have an older elected official who needs to be walked through how to do a direct camera, how to talk to their phone? Or is there a value in having, again, whether you agree on every policy or not, someone who is a extremely good communicator like an AOC who knows how to pick up her phone and talk about the news of the day and do exactly what we're talking about, which is flood the zone or answer questions. I'm just really worried about that we as a party have not figured that out. And also, we don't have the outside infrastructure that the right wing does. I mean, like Carolyn Leavitt today in her press conference has a quote-unquote new media seat, which I think is actually a very smart idea. But what they're going to do is bring in right-wing media every day. They let the Ruthless podcast, which are a bunch of, some former Republican operatives who have launched a very successful podcast. I saw them at the RNC. They had a big stage. They brought up a lot of guests. We're just not there. We're not playing that game as well as they are. And so it's a combination of, yes, inside with the elected officials, but also outside with progressive media.
Yeah. I was speaking a little bit earlier today when I was talking with the audience about this, about how I now love Chris Murphy passionately, because he does seem to bring it to the Republicans. And a couple of weeks ago, frankly, Chris Murphy brought it to the Democrats, too. He had a very impassioned plea where I don't know if he was on CNN, but he was like, where are the Democrats? Where's everybody? Well, I'm sorry. Why aren't we pushing back against all this? Jerry Connolly, of course, beat out AOC for head of the Oversight Committee. Have I missed it? Has Jerry Connolly been fighting the good fight? Has he been on the Sunday shows? Has he been on Morning Joe or CNN? Is he on social media pushing back against Donald Trump? Because honestly, I hope you're going to say he has been, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I don't know. And part of it is that, like, do you go on those shows? Are you out there? But part of it is also breaking through all of that, right? Like we're in an era where you can go on a Sunday show and you can talk and you can make your points and you can pass the interview. But that's not quite what we're looking for right now, right? Like we are looking for folks who can deliver a message that's powerful enough that you go on those Sunday shows and then it gets circulated on social media and it gets picked up elsewhere and it inspires articles and maybe causes people to react in other ways. So, and again, just to a younger group of members of Congress, elected officials, they know how to do this. They are much better at it. I mean, like I think of like the Mallory McMorrows in Michigan. I think of like a Jasmine Crockett from Texas. I think of like a Max Frost from Florida. They are experts at this because, and it's to your point on like the presentation to senators, to a degree, it can't really be taught via PowerPoint. It is something that you grow up with and understand the technology and understand not only how to use it, but its power, and that it's a primary means of communication right now.
So what do we need to do to help the Democratic Party fight against this current administration? I get the feeling, Tim, that there's nobody in charge and there's no plan. Even a bad plan at this point, to me, would be better than no plan.
Yeah. Well, there is part of this that I think, and I'm not saying this is something we should accept, but the reason this is happening is that the party's a little bit in the wilderness right now. We are looking for who is our leader, who are we supposed to rally behind, who's calling the shots. We don't have that with any clarity right now. So that's why we are where we are. But, you should call your senators on these confirmation hearings and these confirmation votes and make sure they know your opinion and that these people should not be confirmed. I know sometimes it feels less useful to be calling your own party. I mean, you obviously have plenty of sway there, particularly if you're in their state, but you should be doing it. So I think that's one thing that's important. And the second is, I think finding and funding, although I'm not sure anyone who is listening is going to open a checkbook and fund progressive media, is hugely important. Find sources of information, support sources of information that create accountability, that are not part of, this new media seat in the White House briefing room that are just going to ask softball questions of the press secretary, and follow and subscribe And that is maybe a not monetary way to do it, right? If you're not want to be a supporting member of progressive news outlet, but follow along, share, help grow those platforms like Heartland Signal. It's incredibly important for us to be able to do that.
By the way, Heartland Signal was quoted in the Alt Media newsletter, the very irreverent News of the Day newsletter put out by Adam Parkhomenko and Sam Youngman. I thought I was reading it, and I was like, wait a minute, that's Heartland Signal.
That's us.
So, yeah, good for us. I want to talk to you more about that. When we come back from a break, our executive editor, Tim Hogan, I've been asking a lot of people this, Tim. Okay, legacy media seems to be letting us down. So what are the other sources, obviously not Heartland Signal and CPT, because those are a given. What are the other places you turn for good information? Tim Hogan is going to be back with me right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Heartland Signal executive editor Tim Hogan, and one thing that I have been asking a lot of people these days is, what would you recommend? What are the sources of information that, other than Heartland Signal and WCPT, that you rely on? I was talking to our media experts, Jennifer Schulze, Mark Jacob, and they, of course, talk about ProPublica as something that they feel is very reliable. You know, here I talk to people from Atlantic Monthly, The Nation, Washington Monthly, which are also sources that I find to be interesting and reliable. Where do you look when you're looking for other sources of information?
Yeah. Well, I think part of this is also what does the broad question here is, you want to find reliable information. I think we also want to support a progressive media ecosystem. And just before getting to individual sources, I think what the right has done so successfully over such a long period of time is just hammer away at mainstream media, claiming that they have a liberal bias, that they are out to get them, that they're not reporting the facts correctly. And the right has done this with a lot of different institutions, but they've so drastically, with their audience, decreased the value of those institutions and that trust that they have driven them to a new media ecosystem, a right-wing media ecosystem that has built a large audience and following there. I think the challenge for people who are center-left or who are liberal is we generally look at mainstream media and maybe we have issues or quibbles with the New York Times phrasing of a headline, or we don't like how they've covered some topic, but generally don't tear them down as non-trustworthy institutions. And so I think that impetus sometimes to find sources of information in a progressive media ecosystem, people feel a little less driven to do it. Like maybe you cancel your New York Times subscription when you get angry at them, but you're probably going to re-up it at some point. But the issue is that right-wing media ecosystem is like a cavalry. Right? It is a cavalry for them. They have built podcasts with large followings, Substacks with large followings, news outlets with large followings. They all amplify each other. And we just haven't done that enough on the left. So when I think about, like, what am I looking at that I think is interesting, growing, reliable, it is obviously, we love Heartland Signal. I think Courier Newsroom is an incredible fast growth outlet that we've seen do a lot of interesting state-based reporting over the last few years. There are individual personalities that I really like who I think are interesting. Someone like a Brian Tyler Cohen, who hosts No Lie on YouTube, is very smart. He's got great guests, and I think has very good perspectives on news of the day. Keith Edwards, who hosts the Keith Edwards Show, which is fairly new. I think just surpassed like 200,000 YouTube followers. The Midas Touch folks are very good. Pod Save America is very good. So when I answer that question, I think about it a little bit from the perspective of, like, what does that, center-left media ecosystem look like, and how can we be helpful in being a voice there, but also, helping build it?
I think your answer is really interesting, because I haven't had anybody talk about YouTube channels or podcasters, and I think that's the future. I was talking to somebody, a year or two ago, about, I was really upset that the New York Times was, it seemed to me that they weren't playing straight and fair. It seemed to me that there was Biden is bad, Trump is okay kind of mentality. And they said, don't worry about the New York Times. Nobody's going to. New York Times is people who read the Times. It's the informed talking to the informed. And that's not going to change anybody's votes. And I thought about that. And I think that, we just had this election, and it seemed like there was a whole blue-collar, working-class contingent that I don't think is reading the New York Times that based their vote on something. And maybe it was just what their friends say in conversation, but maybe it was something they saw that a friend posted on Facebook or some other avenue. And I think that we as Democrats have to figure out where those other places are, and we have to go there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. I think we have to go to those places. We also have to build those places. I think there is a lot of politically adjacent mixed media that seems right-leaning right now, and whether that is, like MMA or UFC or, comedian podcasts like Theo Vaughn that Donald Trump went on. What is that space for us? It is the question of who's the Joe Rogan of the left, I think, is like a misnomer for a lot of different ways. But I think it's also important for us to kind of ask ourselves the question, how did we get in a position where Kamala Harris going on Joe Rogan could have been, not that it's going to change the election one way or another, but was a big question for us media-wise, right? That is not a friendly environment. That is a friendly environment for Donald Trump. And yet we had to make a big strategic calculation about whether or not we go on that program, whether or not it was worth it. And I think that, in itself tells us a little bit about where we are with media.
I read that there was a big debate because obviously she went on Call Her Daddy, which has a huge audience, but there was talk about whether or not she should go on Joe Rogan. And since you have a little more insight, what I read being reported was that it was decided overall that it would be seen as, I don't know, cavorting with the enemy or it just wouldn't give her anything. I'm not so sure I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, there's a very good article that is out 2 days ago in The Hill from Amy Parnes and Jonathan Allen, and it's probably it sounds like it's going to be part of their book. They're writing a book about the 2024 elections, very insightful, and they have a lot of reporting in here that I had not seen before that is fascinating. Includes commentary from Rob Flaherty, who is the deputy campaign manager focused on digital on the Harris campaign, and just sort of the back and forth of scheduling and how the rug was pulled out and the goalposts were kind of moved, use whatever metaphor you want, for trying to make it work. And part of the deal was, they wanted to have VP Harris in Austin to do it. That was a condition, Joe Rogan would not go anywhere else. But look, that takes you off the campaign trail. So what were they going to do? They were going to do this October 25th rally with Beyonce. They were going to go to Texas to highlight some of the strictest abortion laws in the country and then do the Joe Rogan interview. But as they were figuring that out, again, there was a scheduling issue. And if I read the article correctly, and listeners should go read it for themselves, the day that they were going to do it, actually, that is when Donald Trump booked his taping of it, which was floated to the campaign as, Joe has a personal day on that day. So, there maybe the early reporting was, okay, maybe there was some consternation in the campaign about whether or not she should have gone. But at the end of the day, honestly, it looks like a logistics question, and that it was made difficult for the Harris campaign to get it booked.
Interesting. Where did you say that article was?
It's in The Hill. It's from Amy Parnes. It's 2 days ago. It's called How Harris Failed to Land Rogan.
Interesting. We only have a couple of minutes left, so this is where I like to ask a question that takes 10 minutes to answer, just to make everybody's life difficult. Why do you think over time Democrats didn't start buying television stations like Sinclair did, didn't start creating, we've got OANN, we've got Newsmax, heck, News Nation now is right tilting, we got Fox, and on the other side we got MSNBC. Why was that not a priority for Democrats, media, radio, television, whatever, podcasting?
It's a great question. I don't know that I have the right answer to it, but I do think it has something to do with what I mentioned earlier, which is the right for a long time had cast mainstream media as lefty and liberal and not representing their views, and they created a space for a very long period of time to go find funders and say, this entire media landscape is against us. So go support influencers or hosts like a Rush Limbaugh, who actually made it work commercially. That is part of the reason that he was successful, or like a Daily Wire finding funding and setting up a business model that works for them with seed funding over a long period of time. I think for us on the left, there maybe, there has been a little bit of laziness, honestly, of, we're listening to NPR for our radio. We are reading the New York Times for our digital coverage. We are subscribing to our local newspaper. And because we haven't had that same type of acrimony with mainstream media, the impetus for us to go invest hasn't been there. And instead, we've just done a lot of direct investment in campaigns, which is important. But I think you got to do both. I don't think you can be successful just one way. And I think we're finding out the hard way.
Yeah, really. Tim Hogan, executive editor of Heartland Signal, the digital arm of WCPT Radio. Thank you for being here, Tim. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Joan.